Hi, it's Jessi, and welcome to another turning where I sometimes talk about books. My hair is messed just because I just got back from the library, so I had a hat on. Maybe I just put the hat back on. I think I'm not a beanie girl, but I'm going to leave it on because it's better than the messy hair. Alright, we are starting my Reading 2024 Favorites video. I'm doing it a little different this year, or not super different. I think I've done something similar to this before. I'm combining a few different ideas. I'm going to read 3 to 4 books, but I have 2 that I've already gotten from the library that I'm going to start with. So I will tell you how I chose these 2 books, and then you'll see as I do the rest of the books that I had kind of different ways of picking them. So first here is Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. This one I'm going to read because Willow Talks Books had it on her list. And Willow Talks Books also had, and I should have grabbed the book, Compound Fractured by Andrew Joseph White on her list. So Compound Fracture was one of only 2 books I gave 5 stars this year that wasn't a reread or a short story. And it also showed up on her favorites. So I said, let me take her recommendation. And this was her favorite originally written in English book of the year. I do have a backup if this doesn't work for me because it feels kind of heavy and I don't know if I'm in the mood for that. So I could pick her favorite translated work if this isn't working for me, but this is what I'm going with for now. And then the other one I have was from Ashley's Little Library. Ashley had Here We Go Again by Alison Cochrane, my other 5-star of the year, on her list. So I have I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman that I will also read. Now, both of these were highly recommended. This one actually was in contention for like all around on the most lists. So I probably would have read this no matter how I picked what book to read. This one was a little lower down, but also very highly recommended on a lot of people's lists. So I might have read this one anyway. So I am intrigued by both of these. Weirdly, they feel like they fit with the other book more, but maybe not. We'll see how they go. And I'm going to get started probably with I Who Have Never Known Men first, just because something a little bit lighter is maybe not lighter, but smaller is maybe what I'm in the mood for. But it's going to be a couple days because I got to wrap up some other stuff. I just figured because I just picked these up from the library, I should get started. Also, I picked up this because I like to peruse the new editions shelves because it's fun for me. And usually I pick up like a novella that I've never heard of, but I saw this one. And I think I had seen this online somewhere already. And first off, this cover is amazing. It's like a skeleton in like a derby hat. Amazing. But it's the tagline. It's The Impusium by Olga Tokarczuk. But the tagline here is a health resort horror story. And that sounds really cool. So that's not going to be for this, but it is something that I will be reading soon because it sounds really interesting. All right, I will update you when I've finished a book. So this book is about a group of 40 women that are living in a bunker, and our narrator is the youngest among them. At the start of the book, she is an unknown age, but roughly somewhere in the range of like 12 to 16 because she's just around like adolescence. And these women don't know why they're in this bunker. They don't really know how they got there. Their memories are really hazy about how they got there, and they've been there for quite a while. Our narrator does not remember the outside world. Her only memory is of the bunker. Meanwhile, these other women have memories. And we kind of start out, and our narrator is kind of angry because these other women know so much more than her and don't seem to want to share information all that much. I mean, they do teach her about some things, but specifically, she is upset because they will talk about love, and they will talk about love making, and won't really explain to her what those things are. And that's where we open, is just with her ruminating on these things that she's not being told and getting frustrated at that. And the synopsis goes a little further. If you've heard of this book, you've probably heard where it goes from there, but I won't say that because I think it's kind of a fun surprise. This book, this is going to sound really, really harsh. This book is a lot of nothing. It is not a lot of plot, and it doesn't really say much on the surface. It is really mostly just her thoughts as she tries to describe things she doesn't have words for and tries to explain the experience of not understanding anything. And I think it's really well done. And it presents a lot of questions, but doesn't give you answers. What makes a person a person? Okay, I will say I think it does kind of give some answers to that, and some of them I don't agree with. Very specifically, sexual longing to some extent is considered normal and necessary, but that's like kind of, sort of, and it kind of asks like, what do you do? What is the purpose of life? Why do we live? Why continue existing? It was kind of a hard book for me to read right now, just because I am feeling a lot of hopelessness. And I don't know that this book helped. That's one thing in talking about this that I don't hear a lot of people talk about with this. They have mentioned that this is an older book, and it's weird that it's getting a lot of attention now, which is true. This was originally published in, I think, 1995, and then translated in 97, but then it got republished in 2019. But even so, like, why is this suddenly so popular in 2024, which it would have been? Like, if I had just been reading the top books of the year, this would probably have still made the list. And I don't really know. I feel like it fits with a lot of the things people have been feeling lately. But the other thing that's really interesting about this is that the author of this, Jacqueline Hartman, was born in Belgium, but very quickly fled Belgium with her family during World War II. So she is from a Jewish family surviving World War II. And then, of course, after that, seeing the Cold War. And it's fascinating to me because those influences seem very obvious on this book, but nobody's talking about it. And I just think that's really interesting, because I think most, like, 1980s, early 1990s science fiction, people talk about it in reference to the Cold War. And it's interesting to me that that's not being brought up in the conversation about this. I'm not saying I'm intelligent enough to fully articulate those, and certainly not in a non-spoiler way, but I do think it's something to maybe think about when reading this. And again, I think the World War II, survival of World War II thing, yeah, where is it? Yeah, she moved to Casablanca, and it just feels, I don't know, that feels somehow like it informs this book. And I think I'm glad I had looked up the author before reading this, because I do feel like that made this book a little more interesting for me than it otherwise would be. That said, this is sitting somewhere between a 3 and a 4. I think I gave it 3.75, closer to a 4, just because I do admire what it's doing. But for me, it was just a little too rough to get through right now. I don't think it's going to get any easier. All right, I will be picking up Blood Over Brighthaven next. Look at this. It's got sprayed edges. This is a gorgeous book. I kind of want to... Ooh, we got a map. I do kind of want to look. I like peeking. It's just black with gold foil, I think. It's not that fancy. But Blood Over Brighthaven is what I will be picking up next. And I don't really know much about this. I think it's vaguely dark academia. It's about a young woman fighting to be recognized kind of thing, and also a janitor, and I think that has to do with like weird racist, xenophobic stuff going on, which I'm interested to hear about, but this is going to have to wait because Onyx Storm came out and my hold came in way sooner than I expected, so I'm kind of absorbed by that right now. And the third book for this has been picked out, but the hold looks like it might take forever, so I might pick another book because I'm not buying it, or I might see if I can maybe go to one of my neighboring libraries and see if they have it sooner. And I should check that. I'm not excited about that one, but I will talk about that when we get there. All right, the next book I will be starting is not Blood Over Brighthaven. My local library only lets you loan out books for, I think it's 2 to 3 weeks is their standard time, which isn't bad because they automatically renew when they're due, except if somebody has a holdout on it. And so I had to return Blood Over Brighthaven, and I don't know when I'm going to get it back. Luckily, I had a backup, which is, wow, you can't see anything on that. Whatever. The Impusium? Yeah. Health Resort Horror Story by Olga Takorchik. I will look up how to pronounce her name before I give more thoughts on that. This is also Willow Talks Books on their list. It was on her translated works list. And even though I've already read one translated work for this, I am consistently kind of trying to read more. So I'm not upset about the chance of it. It's not their favorite. It was somewhere, I don't remember. But it sounds interesting to me. I don't really know what it's about. I've just started it. I am a couple chapters in, and so far it is about this Polish man who has traveled to a town in the German Alps. I think it's German Alps. Maybe what it's Swiss Alps. Everybody speaking German in the Alps. That supposedly there's a doctor that bought this entire town because if you live there and you do some specific very strict regimens, it'll cure tuberculosis. And this young man has tuberculosis and consumption. And so that's why he's there. I'm getting some distinct queer vibes from this man. I don't know if he actually is or not, but like, I'm getting some distinct queer vibes. Anyway, I will give you my thoughts when I finish it, but so far I'm intrigued, although it's definitely going a little slow. Alright, another plot twist for this video. I will not be finishing the Impusium, at least not in this video. I'm liking it, I'm going to finish it. It's just like a book that's going to take me a while to read. It is slow, it takes a lot of time to process. So I won't be finishing that. The good news, literally like a day, maybe a day and a half after I updated you telling you I was reading that, the audiobook hold for Blood Over Bright Haven came in. So I've been reading that. I'm like a little more than quarter of the way into it, and I'm liking it a lot. So Blood Over Bright Haven, first off, the audiobook is narrated by Moira Quirk, who is, I think, famous, would be how I'd phrase it, for doing the Locked Tomb books, and it is a little weird. Mostly it's very different, and like her tone and her voice is very different for all of it, but she's like one character in this that's very similar to in voice to Ianthe from Locked Tomb, and it's just really weird to hear Ianthe being a sexist dude. Maybe a little Nibirius in there. Anyway, regardless, so Blood Over Bright Haven is about a young woman who wants to be a mage. Well, she is a mage. She wants to be high mage, and every 10 years they test people regularly to become high mages, but they have one woman test every 10 years, and she always fails, and they always use that as an excuse to not let women test for another 10 years, basically. It's like clockwork. So she's about to test, and she wants to be a high mage for her own reasons, but also she's like, if I fail this test, they'll never let another woman do it, and she does pass. But it's like a joke. Her lab assistant is the janitor. And the janitor is from a minority group in this world, Quinn. So that like plays into it. What was weird about this is when like everybody had pitched it that way to me, I got very confused because I think I mentioned before, I've read the first chapter of this book before, and it has nothing to do with any of that. Well, it might. Obviously it's going to tie in, but like the first chapter is about these people like escaping from this blight, which is this like magical thing that kills people. And most of them die except for one guy and his niece. Anyway, so this woman, I like it. I'm like I said, I'm a quarter of the way into it, and it feels like nothing has really happened yet. Which is fine. Like, that's definitely fine. It's her doing research and her educating this janitor on magical theory because he clearly doesn't know because he's a janitor. But there feels like, I keep going back and forth on this, and I haven't read that much of Elma Wong, so I don't know. I might be wrong in assuming this from her, but here's what it feels like. It feels like there's romantic tension between these two characters, except the lead character, whose name I can't remember, the mage, is so incredibly racist. And it is like very much covert racism. It's subconscious racism. Like, the first thing she thinks when she sees this guy, before she knows, she just knows he's a janitor. He hasn't been given to her as a lab assistant yet. And she's trying to figure out where her lab is, and she's like, well, there weren't any real people in the room. It was like, what? You can't just say that about a person. And she keeps being like weirdly like going on like religious lectures at him, because I guess a lot of the magic is founded in their religion. So like you can see how those two things would tie together, but like still. And it's just so uncomfortable because they'll start getting close and then she will say something so out of pocket. And there was this like romantic tension, but like I'm finding it so hard to reconcile that even if I'm sure she will grow. I'm sure she's going, but like even if I don't know, also she's his boss, which makes it weird too. I also think there's going to be like some big reveal, because there's been like hints already about like life for these people, the Quinn, isn't good in this city. They are relegated to, dare I use the word, ghettos? Or tenement housing. They're relegated to like specific sections. They can only get like menial jobs, that kind of thing. And our main character's mentor, who helped her get this job, like get promoted here, helped her with this test, who had been working for, is up till now kind of presented as a very benevolent character, but he makes me so uneasy. Like there's things like she's being horribly treated at this in her job, and he's like brushes it off. He's like, they do this to everyone. She's like, are you sure it's not because I'm a woman? And he's like, no. They're threatened by you. That's why they're doing it. Or this is why like the tenement thing is coming to my mind, because he is like the mage in charge of textiles. And like the janitor character, Tomo, he mentioned, he's like, oh, I had a girlfriend that worked for him, but then he kind of doesn't tell the rest of the story. He's like, it's fine, it just ended poorly. And it's just like Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. I don't know. I'm getting rancid vibes from this guy. I'm getting such rancid vibes from this guy. So that's where I'm at. Like I said, I think I just looked and I was like 27% through. So I should hopefully finish that this weekend and get you my final thoughts on it and let you know. And that, wow, I just, the vibes are just way off. Anyway, we'll see. I will not tell you one way or another how it ends, because I don't want to spoil, but like there's definitely romantic tension, at least from our main character, and she's the only perspective we get. So like but there's definitely a vibe she's given off, and it's making me uneasy. I just wanted to clarify that I don't think that the Quinn are meant to be an allegory for Jewish people specifically, which I think felt like what I was saying. I just think that it's definitely like any sort of immigrant population, refugee population, even an indigenous population, depending on history. And actually, if anything, I think like the allegory for the religions going on feels like a Jewish Christian thing. Because I don't know, whatever. I'm not getting into all of that, but just wanted to clarify that so that it's clear that's not what I thought. All right, let's talk Blood Over Bright Haven. I finished this on like Saturday, so it's been a couple days, but I was just very, very busy this weekend. Let's start with the title. This is maybe one of the best titles. Maybe one of the best titles a book has ever had. It's not like my favorite title, but as far as apt, I don't know, it's incredible, and you don't really fully appreciate it until you get towards the end of it, and I think that's beautiful. This is great. It's a good book. Sayana, the main character, maybe one of the worst main characters. Not in like terms of like quality. I think she's incredible. But like she is terrible. Like awful person. Like genuinely. And she grows and she does better, but like even at the end she is terrible. Like, she has to learn the same lesson over and over and over and over again. But that's so realistic, and it's I don't know, it's fascinating to see, and it's a little bit heartbreaking, and it's also very relatable, and it gives you, in some ways it's hopeful, which seems weird, but like this idea that she is growing. Like, throughout the whole thing, you feel that she's growing, she's improving, she keeps making this mistake, but just because she's making the mistake doesn't mean she isn't getting better, that she isn't improving. And that was really interesting for me, that like watching her fail, watching her make this mistake, have to be reminded again and again, but you know, she's growing in that. And I thought that was really, really interesting to see. Meanwhile, Tummel, the other character, is just incredible. Like, I just, he has so much forgiveness in him that I admire. He just was really wonderful. And this whole book has like this very powerful theme around imperialism, and this very powerful theme around, you know, not turning a blind eye to the things that you maybe not directly, but someone does for you to have the comforts that you have, I thought was really incredible. And that fighting back against that is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to require giving up things you care about, and it might look ugly for a while, but that's the right move in the course of things. And it's a lot of themes that I agree with in theory, but like in practice, I don't know if I would have the strength to implement, I guess is the way to say that. And that's kind of a scary thing to admit, I think, but I don't know. And it seems like we're going in a direction as a nation where I might have to find that out soon. And I don't know. It's a weird place to be in. Yeah. Also, I think there is, I want to say coincidental, but it's hard for me to believe that it's actually a coincidence, that there's this other theme around environmentalism almost. I don't know how intentional it is. I don't know. Because I really do think Emma Wang is focused on the human element here, but there is like an environmental piece, right? And it's interesting to think about, like, if every time you turned on a light switch, you saw the coral reef you were killing, you know? If you saw the plants withering, would you maybe turn that switch on a little less? And it's interesting. Yeah, this one really had me thinking, and I really liked it. It's like a 4.5. Maybe I'll round it up to a 4.75. I don't know. Right now it's a 4.5. And it's really good, and it's one I'm probably going to be thinking about for a while, because I highly recommend. As far as the narration, I love Tamsin Muir. She's an incredible narrator. Not Tamsin Muir, wrong name. Maura Quirk, incredible narrator. There is a section in the middle where it got a little uncanny for me. Most of the time it was fine. And there were a couple of characters that had similar voices to Locked Tomb characters, and that was fine. But there is a section in the middle that was like a little like, wow, I'm getting Harriet the Ninth flashbacks. And I just think Maura Quirk has a specific tone, a cadence that she uses for unhinged women. And I'm okay with that. So just like if you are a Locked Tomb reader, maybe be aware of that going in, but also like, I would highly recommend this for Locked Tomb fans. Like, I think there's something about the themes and the character work that, like, I feel like would be, and also the horror, like the body horror parts. This is not a horror novel by any means, but like there is some body horror, and I feel like Locked Tomb fans are okay with that. So that would be my content warning for this too. I haven't really given it for all of them. Go on Storygraph, there's a pretty good list, but this one I do want to emphasize the body horror, and also sexual assault. I feel the need to give that content warning because that was pretty visceral. But that's going to be it
for my thoughts on that. Next book I'll be reading, you'll find out soon.
All right, so the third book I'm reading for this is the one that was like the overall showed up on the most lists. And for some reason I didn't see this coming, and I really should have seen it coming. This was a top book in 2023. I probably would have read it last year if I had done this the beginning of 2024. But it showed up on the most lists this year. The Will of the Many by James Islington. I gotta be honest, I don't really want to be reading this book. It just gives me bro fantasy vibes. Everything about it being set at like in a very ancient Roman Empire inspired setting really, really turns me off of this. I'm gonna describe this book differently than just about every other YouTuber I've ever seen describe this book, because I think that might at least give you a different perspective. It definitely would not have made me want to read it more. I'm about 15-20% into it so far, so, you know, about 100 pages, give or take. And I'm liking it more than I expected. I'm not loving it. If I gotta be honest with you, I'll give you what the book's about, my first impressions beyond this, but I think this is gonna be about a 3-star book. I think I'm not gonna continue the series. Now, I could be surprised in the rest of this book. There's quite a bit of book left to go. I'm not at a point where I want to DNF it, which is good. But I gotta be honest, I had no interest in reading this book. So I think the two things that people talk about with this book is that it's a dark academic setting, which I haven't even gotten to yet. So let me tell you, I need people to stop describing the first 90% of a fantasy book, all right? And then the other thing is the magic system, which I'll talk about a little, but people describe it very differently than I would. Mostly because, like, I know other books people have read, and it's weird to me they don't reference one in particular. So it's kind of magic in this world is kind of a pyramid scheme, which I think is a fair thing to say. Here's the better one. If you've read Brandon Sanderson's Warbreaker, it's very similar to Breaths. And that, like, in this world, everybody is born with will, which is, like, you have a will you're born with. But in this world, starting when you're 12, you can voluntarily do it. By the time you're 17, you have to do it. You cede some of your will to people above you. And the way this pyramid scheme works is that, like, you have the Octavia, which is like everyone, and the Septimi get their breath from the 7 people below them. And the Sextus would receive will from 6 Septimi below them, and so on and so forth. And you only ever cede half your will. So, like, if you're a Septimus, you're getting half of 7 people's wills. So you have your own will, and then 3.5 will from other people. So you have 4.5 total will. But if you're yielding to a Sextus, then you're giving up half of 4.5 will, which means you're giving up 2.25 will to the person above you. I guess I didn't really need to give you all the math, but it works similar to Brandon Sanderson's breath system, except without the color thing. But, like, the idea is that, like, if you have given up half of your will, you're weaker, you're slower. That's my heating. I'm gonna let it run. And people that have more are stronger, more resilient, faster. There's also things you can do with will. An example we see relatively early on is they have these, like, giant flying machines. And then, of course, it's very Roman Empire inspired. Here's how I would pitch this book, which is weirdly nobody ever talks about it. They're like, the protagonist is an orphan that is adopted by somebody high up in the hierarchy that helps him get into this school. This is a story about the prince of a nation that has been conquered by this Roman Empire inspired nation, and then thinks about possibly getting revenge on them. But, like, at the beginning of the book, he's very much in a space where he's like, if I could get revenge, I can, but these people are unstoppable. Weirdly, maybe it's just because it's fresh in my mind, I would compare this kind of to Trader Bar Cormorant. We're not to the extent that has gone yet, but that feels like the route we're going to be going down the path we're going to follow. But not nearly as dark. So far it hasn't felt as dark. And there was something else. It's kind of giving me
Poppy War a little bit. Like, it very much is giving... I haven't read it yet, but you will have already seen my thoughts on Blood Over Brighthaven, and there's some elements there that sound similar between these two. I don't know. My problem with this book so far is that it's bringing in a lot of elements I have seen in other books, and it's not, so far, doing any of them in a way that makes it more interesting to me. That's my overall feelings on it. We'll see, it might change by the end. I hear there's some twists later on. A lot of other booktubers have been reading this recently because it was somebody's favorite, and everybody's favorite videos are coming, reading favorites videos are coming out. So I just saw Kayla from Books and Lala did her video on it. And she gave it 5 stars. Somebody else read it and gave it 4 stars. I think the worst thing I've heard about this book so far is that, like, it's not doing anything new and exciting. It's a good version of stuff we've seen before. Is the worst thing I've heard about this book so far. And that's kind of how I'm feeling so far, is it's fine. But we'll see what I think when I finish the whole thing.
Sorry for the bathrobe and the less than appealing appearance I've got going on today. I wasn't going to record this in my pajamas, but I finished The Will of the Many, and I wish I didn't have to read the ebook on my phone so you could have seen my reaction to the last little bit. Also, Kindle tried to do me dirty, alright? So, like, there's, like, can I say this without spoiling it? I guess it's not a spoiler to know that the book's not done yet, right? So, like, there's the chapters, and then there's a last section that has a different thing, and then the acknowledgments, and then there's, like, characters and glossary. I haven't read that last bit yet. But the last section that's in, like, Latin, I don't know what the word means, before the acknowledgments, when I got to that part, I was like, I think this is going to be, like, an epilogue type thing, but maybe not. The Kindle popped up with, like, a, would you like to rate this book thing that it pops up with at the end of the books? Like, excuse me, the book wasn't done yet, Kindle. And if you read this, the book wasn't done yet. He got me. I had like a lot of nuanced thoughts I wanted to bring to you, but this ending got me. James Islington, I've heard it pronounced both ways. Somebody please tell me which one's right. I've also heard Islington, like the S just is silent. Whatever. I'm supposed to talk about this now? Reading-wise, I don't know what it is. This is probably, like, I think this is one of those I give myself, like, 2 days to settle before I rate it, because, like, right now, the ending has got me like this. So it's somewhere between a 4 and a 5. I don't think it's a 5. I think on my rating scale, it's going to come out around somewhere in the 4.7 to 4.8 range, and I'll probably put it as a 4.75 on, whatchamacallit? Whatever that site is. Storygraph. But man, people were right. This book slaps, all right? It takes a while to get there. Like, don't get me wrong. I was, like, reading this, and I was like, oh, this is a 3 to 4 star, basically, the whole book, until, like, the last, like, 10 to 15%. There's a lot of really good things in here. I don't know. I think the character work is really good for the most part. I think the mystery going throughout this is really good. I think that's why this is kind of spreading, because it's great for fantasy fans. I also think this would really hook mystery fans, even if, because the world building in this is very easy. It's nothing too complicated, so I do think you would really hook a lot of people that aren't normally fantasy fans, but maybe are historical fiction fans, because there's kind of that history buff to it. Mystery fans for sure, because this whole thing, this isn't a spoiler. I don't think I talked about this much when I talked about the last book, or the last update I gave you for this. The first, like, 30% of this book takes place before Vis, our main character, gets to the school. But the, like, synopses online all talk about the school as the main thing, which, to be fair, 70% of the book is most of the book. That's worth it. And there he's investigating the death of a guy whose brother, who was ruled a suicide, but his brother is convinced died more mysteriously. And I think that mystery actually is very compelling. And I think the way this is torn between different loyalties is very interesting. Let me scoot you back. I feel like you're, like, right on top of me. So I think that's all really well done. As you can see, I pulled this up to record much more abruptly. I was actually planning to record with a totally different backdrop, but I need my raw immediate reaction. Yeah, I think the one thing that I like wanted to complain about is that this is very broy. Don't get me wrong, the girlies that are saying it's for the girls are not wrong either. But like there's a little bit of like the school plot has a little bit of like High School Musical Mean Girls going on. And that's kind of fun. The magic is definitely an MLM, like it's that, but like I don't feel like that's like as unique as that kind of sounds when you say it that way, but also like it is. This, I don't know if I'd go so far as to call him a Mary Sue. I don't think I would quite go that far. He is very good at most things, but also justifiably very good, and like he works really hard to be good at those things. So I don't think, like, I think that would be a fair criticism if somebody were to criticize this for that. However, I don't think I would criticize it for that. The criticism mostly that gets me is how women are handled in this, which is going to sound like a weird one because there's a lot of female characters and they're all incredible, but they are all kind of defined by the relationship to men to an extent. Like they have other things going on, but like, I don't know, it was hard for me to fully, and I cannot articulate this very well, and I also like understand that this might just be a me thing and not like objective. You know, there's somebody's wife or somebody's ex-girlfriend or somebody's love interest, and I think every woman falls into one of those categories. Oh, or they just don't matter. There's like one exception to that, and even she kind of doesn't do that much. The one character that I was looking for something from, I did get what I was kind of hoping for from her, although maybe not. I don't know. We'll see how that shapes up in book 2. And I am going to read book 2. I'm going to continue this series. I was not expecting that. I was expecting to come out of that and be like, that was fine. I'll recommend it to people. Not really. I'm happy where it's at. I'm not happy. I need to know more now. I need to know more yesterday. Yeah, people were right about this one. This book's great. I don't know if it's going to make my favorites at the end of this year. I would bet it's going to end up on a lot of people's favorites again for 2024 or 2025, which would put it 3 years in a row being people's favorites, I think. Did this book come out in 2024 or 2023? Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong book. But a lot of people have already been reading it, similar to me, for this kind of video and loving it. I anticipate seeing this pretty high up there at the end of this year again. I don't know. Yeah, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect book. I want to make that clear. I do think there is something, I don't know, there's a vibe. You can tell when a book is written by a man and there's like a vibe to it, and there is that vibe, right? That's the best I can say to explain that, but that's really my only complaint. Yeah, wow. Also, the writing isn't like anything to write home about, no pun intended. But not every book has to be beautifully written to be good. The next book I'm reading, let me get up and get that. Yeah, there's a next book. We'll talk about that. I always kind of set myself, please ignore how everything back there. I usually set myself some sort of limit for when I'm going to cut these the info gathering part of this video off. If I was smart, it would be when I start recording the video, but usually what I said is when I upload my favorites video. My favorites video, if you haven't seen it, whatever corner it is, please do. So I had the last person, literally the last video I recorded to put on my thing, and I kind of was hoping for a 4th book in this. I had the 2 of like people that had a 5-star of mine that I was reading. I had the one that was the overall favorite. This ended up with 7 votes overall, although I'm sure more will add up as more videos trickle in. But the last person, Lexi, aka Newly Nova, had The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White on her list. And that was not a 5-star of mine, but it was one of my favorites of 2024. Also, Andrew Joseph White is maybe my current favorite author of all time, maybe. So much so that I pre-ordered his adult book that's coming out later this year and then immediately regretted it because it has to do with forced pregnancy, and I don't know if I need that in my life. But she also had The Spear Cuts Through Water on her list, which was a 5-star of mine from 2023, probably, that I absolutely adore and loved and think about constantly to this day. So I figured I'd add her. Let me take that out so you all don't
get doxxed. Her favorite book to the list, also because it's one I'm really interested in. I am a little nervous because this is way thicker than I thought it was, but unlike The Will of the Many, I can get an audiobook for this. Let me tell you, I'm so chaotic and disorderly today. But let me tell you how much Amazon exclusive Audible exclusive books piss me off. It feels, quite frankly, antitrust. And I'm not a lawyer, but it feels anti-competitive. Anyway, I'm going to be reading Shark Heart. I'm really excited about this. My understanding of this is that it is about a man who is turning into a shark, and it's his wife dealing with that. And the thing about this world is that that's just a thing that happens to people sometimes, and you just kind of have to handle it. And I know this is going to wreck me because I know from past experiences that books about grieving somebody that's still alive wreck me. So I'm probably going to cry. But I will let you know my thoughts when I finish this. This is Pumpkin Porter. Air Gordon. Wow, I didn't even see the joke. And we're from Solace Brewing Co. And this is my first time having it. And it's a porter. Not sure I'm getting any pumpkin. Shark Heart, A Love Story by Emily Haddock. This was good. I liked it. I didn't love it. And that's kind of all I want to say about it because I want it to have bigger meaning than it has, and I'm disappointed that it doesn't have a bigger meaning than it has. So I think I've already sold this book to you, what it's about. Yes. So this, let me start with the most obvious, easy, positive. The writing in this is incredible. Well, it's incredible most of the time. It's got these really cool, like, poetic moments, where you'll get, like, line by line, you know, to be of the ground is to be life. You taught me that. You, a woman whose deepest belly laugh makes no sound. A woman who notices every detail. A woman made of brilliance you don't see, no matter how many times I show you. Sometimes I wonder if you might not be a person at all, but a spirit or a fairy or a memory. And it's beautiful. There are sections that are told as, like, little, like, plays where we get, like, a scene setting and script. Those parts were a little weaker for me, but they're still really well written. So that's, like, the biggest thing that's objectively, well, not objectively, but but to me was just such an easy positive to say about this book. The rest gets a little bit more complicated. I think the characters are fine. I think the story itself is mostly good. I just wanted there to be a little more to it. So let me talk through it. It's in, well, 3 parts and an epilogue. The first part I loved like 90% of, and then the last little bit I was like, you're losing me. The second part started rough, but then I ended up really liking the rest of. The third part I kind of hated. Could have done without the third part. Don't really know what it adds to the story. Also really hated the narrator's performance on that one, because I was tandem reading, listening to the audiobook, and I really hated the audiobook, that section. And then the epilogue was beautiful, really well done. So there was like a lot of ups and downs on my opinion on this book. And then what is it saying? You know, like, I spent a lot of this book trying to figure out what this mutation disease was. Like, what was it symbolizing? What was the point? I think I even said in my intro clip, I assumed it was going to be a metaphor for cancer. And then I was, like, trying to figure out there's, like, a fear around it that doesn't quite fit that. So I was like, maybe it's AIDS. Maybe this is supposed to be a commentary on, like, the AIDS epidemic. But I was like, there's a behavioral change that doesn't make sense for that. So maybe it was, like, a mental health thing. And I was asking some friends, and dementia came up. And there is a lot of memory talk about this, like, oh, I hope you never forget me and whatever. But my big problem with that is that all of the people we see in this book that have this mutation, all the times we see this mutation in play, it is somebody that is turning into a predator. I assume that's how the disease works. We never hear examples of somebody turning into a little fluffy bunny rabbit or a worm. So with that comes an inherent violence. The people act violently. And all of those metaphors fall apart to me when you add that piece in. Because I think there's supposed to be this give and take about, like, you can love a person through something, but eventually you have to let them go. And I thought that was really beautiful, but like when I started thinking about it in terms of any of these other things, it doesn't work for it to be like a deadly illness, right? Like cancer doesn't quite work because you're not losing them in the same way. This person still exists, you just can't interact with them in the same way. Or, you know, if it's a thing for mental illness, I don't like what it's saying about like what somebody with bipolar or schizophrenia might act like, or this idea that you have to abandon them, that you cannot help them after a certain point. I don't like that. And so I did a thing I rarely do. I usually say I'll do it, but I rarely actually do, which is I looked up interviews with the author. And best I could tell from reading through 3 or 4 different interviews, it's nothing. It's not nothing. She really meant to write a story about change and grief, which she does. I think she does a brilliant job of that. But it's nothing more specific than that. And there's something about that just leaves me feeling a little hollow about the book, that it's not something big or profound, that it's not talking about something that is a direct connection to something else. And I don't know if that's me or the book, you know, and I don't know, maybe I should look at some reviews to see how other people feel about it. But to me, it just being a general metaphor for loss doesn't quite work for me. But it's still good. It's still 4 stars, a little lower on the 4 stars than it might have been if there was like something a little more profound in it. I also just, I don't know, I wish I hadn't read so many of her interviews, because like the one thing she talks about was that she has not experienced loss in the way that the characters in this book have, and that grief for her is a thing she experiences whenever there's a change, positive or negative, in her life. Like the example she gave was about a friend might come to her and say, I'm engaged, and that to her causes immense grief because things are going to change. And I don't relate to that. Change to me is exciting and sometimes scary, but it's never sad. And I've gone through some profound changes in my life. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's that I live a life that's more flexible, and that's why it doesn't hit me that way. But the idea that like any change is inherently something worth grieving or something you grieve over just doesn't hit for me. So I wanted it to be something a little more precise to justify the emotions here, I think I think that's the best way I can say it. But I think it's beautiful. I do think this is an incredible book. I think I would have been very happy with it being a novella, honestly. But it was good. I'm not upset. This continues to not be a favorite setup of mine, mostly because the front door is literally right there. But for today, this will have to work. I'm going to quickly wrap up this video so that I can get out of here and make dinner because I haven't eaten today. First off, the book I didn't read for this video, The Impusium. I am still finishing this. I'm like a third of the way, halfway through. If you want my thoughts on that, check out my wrap-up. I'm doing monthly wrap-ups now, I guess. So check that out if you want to hear my thoughts on that when I finish it. Literally, like 2 days a day, not even, because it took me like 2 days to read it. Literally like a day after Blood Over Bright Haven came in, the audiobook for that came in. And that'll make me go through it so fast, because when I can tandem read, I get through books like that. Anyway, so then there were 4 books I did actually read. I'm going to kind of sort them into 2 groups. The bottom group are these were good. They were fine. I don't think they're going to stick with me as much as maybe I had hoped. Shark Heart, when I initially finished it, I was pretty impressed by. And it just hasn't stuck with me. And what's worse is that for you, it's been like 30 seconds. For me, it's been like a week or maybe 2. I've watched a lot of vlogs of people reading this since then, because it was in a lot of people's favorites and things. And everybody is just so much more impacted by this book than I was, that I almost like it less because I didn't have that effect. And that might not be fair to the book, but I also do think if a book is trying to convey a feeling and I don't feel that feeling, that is a failure on the part of the book. So I do feel that to an extent with this. So Shark Heart was fine. I think it's good. It's one I would recommend, but I'm not really sure to whom. I guess people that kind of like, no, I don't even know. Like, I've seen it compared to Our Wives Under the Sea, which I
fundamentally do not get. But that's kind of what I was expecting going in, honestly. I've also seen it compared to Monstrilio, which I also don't get. I think it's mostly for more lit-fic audiences that just are okay with a little weirdness. Then there was I Who Have Never Known Men. All of these books, by the way, have been returned to the library. This library does not give me any time with anything that's actually popular. So I Who Have Never Known Men. That's one I don't find myself thinking of it often. But when I'm reminded of it, I think of it a lot. So it's a case of like when I'm thinking of it, there's so much going on. But I don't think of it that often. I would mostly recommend this to lit-fic people. I think it's where it probably will find most of its audience. Although I do think there is particular sci-fi reader that wants more of this element of like just quiet, introspective, thoughtful thing, but it does feel more lit-fic, more honestly fans of classics. Like I'm trying to think of a good example. I want to say The Color Purple, and that is wildly not accurate, but I also kind of think it is. Or those kind of books, Jane Eyre maybe, where it's mostly a single character and they're reflecting. And I think there's a huge audience for that specific kind of book. I liked it. I have definitely recommended it to people. I don't know that I loved it, though. And then at the top, 2 books that I really, really liked. One that I think I definitely liked more. So let's start with The Will of the Many. This is definitely good. It's really, really good. I think my problem in retrospect is that most of my opinion of how good this is comes from the ending. The ending was amazing, and it's intriguing, and it hooks you in, which is not what you want at the end of your book. You kind of want that at the start of your book. Yeah, anyway, I'm a sucker for a good ending, and that's what got me into it. I'm definitely still interested in reading the next book in the series. But it's just one that's like good. It was fun. I don't know that it was saying anything particularly deep. I don't think that it was doing anything particularly new. It was just interesting and fun. Whereas my favorite from this video by far, Blood Over Bright Haven, I think was amazing. I think it's doing a lot. I think it's saying a lot. I think I would recommend it to just about any fantasy fan, honestly, with those caveats that I mentioned in its section about like content warnings. But I'm glad I ended up reading it because I almost didn't, and I think if I hadn't read it for this video, as much as it's been recommended to me and as much as I've heard amazing things, I probably wouldn't have. So I'm really, really glad that I got to it because I really enjoyed it. And now, peek behind the curtain, I just finished it a couple days ago, so I don't know the longevity. The rest of these books I have read anywhere from days to weeks ago. And so I can judge that. For this book, I don't know yet how it's going to sit with me over time. But I have a feeling it's going to leave an impact that lasts. So that's it from me. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like the video to let YouTube know you liked it. Comment what your favorite book of 2024 was, or your favorite book so far of 2025. I don't care, whichever. And that's going to be it. I love y'all. Bye.